If I Only Knew by Wanderlove, Chapter 10. The war slogs on with no end in sight. Obi-Wan is perpetually exhausted, pulled from battle to meeting and then back again, all while the few moments of true relaxation he grabs with Anakin or Cody grow ever shorter. The thought of yet another call makes his temples ache, and yet he can't not take this call. Quinlan had come out of the blue to set it up, a short and unexpected message that stank of desperation, and Obi-Wan could hardly say no to one of his oldest friends. "Quinn!" He greets the familiar dark skin in Yellow Street coming to life across the shaky comm connection. They were deep in the Outer Rim, and communications were already spotty at best out here. "It is so good to see you looking healthy and well." "And you look like shit," Quinlan says bluntly. He startles a barking laugh from Obi-Wan. "You should let me know who's causing such sleepless nights. I'll give Pup over and give them a piece of my mind." "That would be the Separatists. Droids don't rest, and so neither do we." "Then I'm sorry that this talk must be cutting into what little time you do have set aside for rest." "Don't be. I know you wouldn't have calmed unless you were truly desperate. How can I help, my friend?" Quinlan inhales shakily, looking uncharacteristically grim. "It's about Isla. Obi, you know I would never, ever ask you to use your position on the council to secure favors for myself, but for Isla? We're already headed at full speed to reinforce the 327th, if that's what this is about." No. Quinlan's shoulders slump. "It's not that sort of favor. I don't know where to start. But the last time we calmed, Isla was unusually withdrawn, and when I pressed her on it, she informed me that she intends to leave the Order." "What?" "That was my reaction exactly. It seemed to come out of nowhere, but she's broken her vows to the Order. She's become attached to one of the troopers in her battalion. They want to settle down on some planet, get married, have a bunch of bouncing babies together. They thought she could wait until the war was over, but after the latest battle, when she hesitated to send Bly's unit out and instead chose a far riskier and strategically unwise position to protect him, she realized her judgment was too far compromised. She feels it is her duty to resign from the Order, but if she does, she'll likely never see Bly again. He can't leave his post. It'll be considered desertion. They don't know what to do, but whatever happens, I know it will be so much easier if we have an advocate on the council. Please, Obi-Wan, I'm begging you. Please, help them." Obi-Wan sits still and quiet for a moment, his heart breaking for Isla and the painful battle between duty and love that must be playing out in her mind and heart. Obi-Wan is no stranger to such eternal battles, though it appears Isla is a far stronger and truer Jedi than he could ever be. She at least has the strength to admit her weakness and forfeit her position in the Order, while Obi-Wan refuses to do the same. He must have been silent for too long, because Quinlan continues, voice hesitant. "Obi-Wan, please say something." "Oh, of course I will help," Obi-Wan says, startled out of his reverie. He realizes at some point his hand came up unconsciously to stroke his beard. "I'm sorry, I was only thinking." "Thank you." The relief in Quinlan's voice is palpable. "Do you think you'll be able to convince the others to, I don't know, allow some sort of compromise? At least until the war ends and Bly can resign his command?" Obi-Wan pauses, unsure of how much hope to pass along to his friend. Compromise is certainly within reach, as this will not be the first time the Council has decided to look the other way for the good of the war effort. But while the already existing tendency to compromise offers some precedent, it also means that some of the more conservative members, led by Masters Mundi and Gallia, will oppose any further compromise on principle alone, no matter the details of the case. They'll want to make an example out of Isla, if only to prove that they will not bend every rule or edict. It will be an uphill battle, one that will take all of his much-vaunted powers of negotiation. "I'll have to talk to Isla," he says instead, not willing to build up his friend's hopes. Quinlan nods. "I told her to wait until you arrived before she did anything. She agreed reluctantly. She doesn't like concealing the truth." "We'll be there soon enough, and we will have a bit of a grace period. For a matter like this, they'll want to assemble the full council. No easy task with all of us scattered across half a dozen battlefields, each with their own spotty comm connections and logistical challenges. And then they'll want to debate it. And debate it again. In all likelihood, we won't know the outcome for months." "And with any luck, the war will be over by then and render the whole verdict moot." "If only," Obi-Wan snorts. "Obi-Wan, thank you, truly. I can never repay you for this." Quinlan says, voice suspiciously thick and clogged. Obi-Wan smiles gently. I'll make sure to bring this up next time I'm trying to run away from Anakin and Ahsoka, and you are tempted to give away my hiding spot. He teases gently. Quinlan laughs weakly. Of course, brother, whatever you need, he responds. May the Force be with you. And with you. The hologram disappears with a subtle snick fizz, and the lights of his room automatically adjust. Obi-Wan stares out of his small port window, lost in thought, until Ahsoka pokes her head in. Master? She queries, a little hesitant. Obi-Wan looks up and gives her as warm a smile as he can manage. Yes, little one. Did you sleep at all? Ahsoka asks accusingly, her eyes narrowed. Obi-Wan raises an eyebrow at her. If you don't tell Anakin, I'll let you borrow my lightsaber for 2 hours to practice those Jakai katas you like so much. 4 sessions of 2 hours each spread out across 2 weeks. She counters, crossing her arms over her chest. I'm not risking Sky Guy's and Commander Cody's wrath for anything less. 3 sessions, 2 weeks. Obi-Wan responds, rising to his feet. Take it or leave it, that's my final offer. Sure, but you have to show me proof that you've slept more than 4 hours in a row before the 2 weeks is up. Ahsoka shoots back. Or I'm sure I can let something slip to Painless about how you've been stealing stim shots from the infirmary when he's not looking. Oh, you are so much better at this than Anakin ever was, Obi-Wan says proudly. Ahsoka breathes. You never a bargain, Padawan Tano. Does that mean we have a deal? We have a deal, Obi-Wan confirms, holding out his hand to shake on it. Well, now that that's taken care of, why did you come to find me? Have we arrived yet? He seems a bit early. Yeah, not really, Ahsoka admits as they wind their way through the corridors. It seems there's some trouble on Jabiim. We've been asked to divert resources to help. They want you on the bridge to help make the final call. On the bridge, Rex, Cody, and Anakin are already waiting. Anakin is frowning fiercely, hunched over the hollow table as he argues with Cody. Rex stands off to the side, occasionally adding in a few words of his own. Obi-Wan steps forward. What seems to be the problem? He asks, voice clipped and no nonsense as he steps forward. Master Leska and a bunch of Padawans are stranded on Jabiim. Anakin begins without preamble. There's reports of Ventress being on planet as well, but we can't just leave Isla to die. If we split the fleet, we will never be able to evacuate everyone. Master Leska indicates he still has over 9,000 troops planetside, nearly 13,000 if you count the Jabiim loyalists. Cody sighs. 9,000? But we deployed over 18,000 troops to Jabiim originally. At Cody's grim pursed lips, Obi-Wan trails off. Oh, and what of Isla's position in the Quell system? Has it improved at all since we last spoke? No better, no worse, Cody says helplessly. Obi-Wan closes his eyes and reaches out to the Force, begging for guidance. As always these days, it is tinged with a thick, oily film of darkness that Obi-Wan must fight through to get even a whisper of foresight. There's darkness no matter which path we choose, Obi-Wan says finally with a heavy sigh. His eyes meet Anakin's. But it's worse. So much worse if we choose not to go to Jabiim. I don't know what will happen on that planet, but we cannot ignore their pleas for help. Isla is strong and resourceful. Even if we can only spare a single Star Destroyer, I know she'll use it to turn the tide to her advantage. Obi-Wan hesitates. Even if we manage to avert the future I glimpse, Jabiim won't be pretty. When has this war ever been pretty? This is different. We should send Ahsoka away to aid Isla. I don't want her to see this. Send her away, deep into separatist space, with only a single ship. That sounds dangerous. Obi-Wan feeds him the feeling of hopelessness that filled every crevice of his being upon trying to glimpse the future on Jabiim. Anakin shivers. Oh, he thinks. Care to clue the rest of us in, Masters? Ahsoka demands. Her voice is far away. Anakin and Obi-Wan still clinging to each other in the Force. Is this what you feel like every time Sky Guy and I use our bonds? No, this is much worse, Rex mutters. At least with you and General Skywalker, I don't feel like I walked in on some sort of passionate tantric meditation session. Obi-Wan's difference turning beet red. Across the bond, he feels a similar reaction from Anakin, though it is quickly followed by a not quite totally smothered sheepish burst. He does look kind of hot when he's meditating. Startled, Obi-Wan draws out of Anakin's mind far faster than he normally would. He stares at Anakin in shock and impossible. Anakin blushes even harder. We'll be sending Ahsoka ahead with a Paxum to help Isla. while the rest of the fleet diverts to Jabiim.
Anakin says, quickly clearing his throat and deliberately shuffling out of Obi-Wan's reach. Cody and Rex looked at Obi-Wan expectantly for elaboration.
Oh, yes, of course, Obi-Wan says, fumbling a little as he tries to recover his equanimity
from Cody's knowing look and Ahsoka's suspicious glances. He's not really succeeding, but he presses onward. Still, try as he might, for the rest of the planning session, he can't quite escape the revelation that Anakin, whose finely carved features and bright, guileless charm could likely land him anyone he so desired, finds Obi-Wan physically attractive.
The battlefields of Jabiim are like the scene from a horror hollow. The bodies of troopers and loyalists alike tossed carelessly across the dead husks of the droids, all of it sinking down into an oozing mixture of mud and blood. Obi-Wan surveys the battle from the cliffside, a strange mix of fiery adrenaline and numb shock pulsing through his body. He holds his saber loosely in one hand, breathing heavily.
Sir? A gentle touch to his shoulder. Obi-Wan whirls around, and when he comes back to himself, he's got Cody in a chokehold, his lightsaber dangerously close to his commander's coveted.
He immediately drops his saber and backs away in horror. He has to grip his wrist tightly with the opposite hand in order to stop the shaking. Cody waits patiently, holding himself very still.
Yes, Obi-Wan finally says, his voice somewhat composed.
As General Skywalker said,
Cody continues, still watching him warily.
He's like you, but worse. We didn't want to get too close.
I'll handle it.
Obi-Wan straightens, the thought of Anakin in distress infusing him with sudden clarity. He uses the Force to call his lightsaber back to hand.
Where is he?
Cody gestures to the west, and Obi-Wan uses the bond to figure out the rest. Sure enough, he finds Anakin a few kilometers away, pacing relentlessly with his lit saber still in hand. Ever so often he will lash out, severing the arm or head of already inactive droids. Echo is loyally standing guard at a safe distance. The trooper nods when he spots Obi-Wan, clearly relieved, and turns his back to give them some privacy.
Anakin?
Obi-Wan calls out as he approaches. Thunder rumbles ominously overhead, and Anakin continues pacing as if he hasn't heard.
Anakin!
Anakin's head snaps up to him, eyes feverishly bright in his face.
Obi-Wan, he breathes. I thought I couldn't. I didn't. I know, dear one, I know.
Obi-Wan responds, holding out a hand and creeping ever closer.
It's over now. It doesn't feel like it's over,
Anakin says, voice bleak. Obi-Wan's hand finally makes contact, and suddenly Anakin is twisting his wrist, grabbing onto Obi-Wan's forearm like a drowning man. Even through the layers of his robes, the touch burns his skin, makes him feel alive in a way nothing else has for days.
Come, let us return to the ships,
Obi-Wan says softly. He reaches out with the Force, tugging at Anakin's saber. Anakin says nothing, and Obi-Wan takes that as permission, floating Anakin's saber away from his hand, flicking it off, and tucking it into his own utility belt. Anakin's eyes haven't left his face, and across the bond, Obi-Wan feels a molten, slow, hot magma hunger bubbling to the surface. Obi-Wan flexes the fingers of his free hand, inhaling sharply. All his defenses are gone, wiped away by exhaustion and the preceding battle, and the own desperate need in his own veins. With Echo's help, they moved towards and slowly board a nearby gunship. It started raining again, and the bodies around them are beginning to slip and sink deeper in the mud. In the shuffle towards the gunship, Obi-Wan's hand detaches from Anakin's, but across the wide-open bond, he feels like they're still touching, a live wire running between them.
I'm glad.
Anakin begins, his voice numb, as they watch the ground fall away from beneath them.
I'm so glad you convinced me to send Ahsoka on without us. All Force.
Obi-Wan inhales deeply, his agreement pulsing across the bond, and tries desperately to draw himself back inwards. But his furiously beating heart won't be calmed, and his battle-apt blood won't be cooled. He and Anakin exit the ship, one set of many muddy survivors trudging their way across the navigator's hangar, and make for a side hallway feeding off the great hangar. They all look out of place in the two clean white lines of the negotiator's interior. They are greeted there by Rex and Cody, who are furiously debating their next move, clean up on Jabiim or a hasty exit to aid the 327th. Obi-Wan sighs. They have hardly had a moment to catch their breaths, let alone take a shower, but now of course he must deal with this headache too. It never stops. By the look on his face, Anakin is not really paying attention, still stuck back on Jabiim. His friend's face is haunted, mud streaked across hollow cheeks and two luminous eyes, and Obi-Wan imagines that he looks much the same, if not worse. Their eyes connect once more over their commander and captain's heads, and all of a sudden Obi-Wan finds he can't look away, his blood still singing from battle. Cody's and Rex's voices have faded to background, drowned out by the pounding of his pulse, beating in time with the flutter he sees in the curve of Anakin's neck. He still sees the same hunger in Anakin's eyes, still feels it threading across the bond. It's unbearable. Abruptly, Obi-Wan holds up a hand. "I'm sure we can have this discussion later," he says, cutting off whatever Cody was saying and still not breaking eye contact with Anakin. Anakin smirks, pink lips pulling upwards as the harsh lights of the hangar highlight the plane of his cheek, the sweat of his brow. He turns and begins to skirt around Cody and Rex. "We all need a shower and some rest. I'm sure the war effort can survive a few hours without us." "General, I'm not sure." "Ow! What was that for, Vode?" Rex squawks. Obi-Wan can't really follow what exactly Cody is furiously whispering, too busy following Anakin. But whatever it is, it must work, because he doesn't hear any further protest. They leave the hangar, wind their way through the corridors, an unerring path for Obi-Wan's quarters. He's never before thought that his quarters were so far from the hangar, but now he curses every footfall. When they arrive, Anakin waves a hand over the keypad without hesitation. The door slides back with a soft swish, and Anakin strides inside, Obi-Wan close behind him. The door slides shut behind them, and there is a split-second pause. Then, Anakin whirls around and crashes into Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's back hurts from where Anakin has slammed him up against the bulkhead, and their teeth and noses clack painfully, but it can't drown out the pleasure as they finally kiss! Obi-Wan's hands fly up and scrabble at Anakin's robes. "Off!" he commands in whisper, nipping at Anakin's lower lip. The bond is still wide open from the battle and its aftermath, so Anakin can't quite hide the way Obi-Wan's order makes him shudder with dizzying wants. Obi-Wan can't resist the thrill of pleasure and shoves Anakin back towards the small bunk. Anakin lands on his ass with solid oomph, eyes dark and wide as he stares up at Obi-Wan hungrily. Obi-Wan begins to deliberately, carefully remove his own dirty robes and armor, feeling as if he is shedding so much more. "Oh, you're like that? Okay then, take it off!" Anakin scrambles to obey, ripping tabards and armor from his body with characteristic, thoughtless haste, wriggling around on the bed to remove his pants. Obi-Wan briefly detours, ducking into the attached fresher to grab a handful of Bacta patches. "Hey, what are you—" Anakin sounds panicked, confused, but Obi-Wan finds his goal within an instant and returns to the room quickly enough. He holds up the packets as an explanation, and he feels a thread of confusion, followed a little too slowly by understanding, as he climbs up on the bed, his pale thighs spread to either side of Anakin's lean, golden ones. He frowns as Anakin darts forward again, trying to initiate another kiss. "Anakin," he says slowly, placing a hand on his startlingly beautiful chest to force off further movement. "Have you ever been with someone like this?" "Not exactly," Anakin says, turning crimson as he begins to squirm. He leans back against the pillow. Obi-Wan just looks at him. Just kissing, mostly, but I know what to expect." If this is some sort of weird hang-up about my so-called virginity, then don't," Anakin says hotly. "Padme says that virginity is just a patriarchal construct meant to reinforce existing power structures and— Hush, dear one, I'm just taking a step back. If you've never done this before, we'll need to go a bit slower. It doesn't bother me," Obi-Wan admits as he tilts his head and leans down, caging Anakin in with his forearms. "It really doesn't bother me at all. Quite the opposite, actually." "What? You like—" Anakin's eyes return to their earlier darkness. Indeed," Obi-Wan says, distracted by how kissable Anakin's neck looks, splayed out like that. Once they're finished, they lay there panting, tangled up and staring up at the ceiling. Finally, Obi-Wan begins to move away reluctantly. Anakin makes a protesting noise, but Obi-Wan simply places a finger to his lips and starts to his feet.
Hush, you'll thank me when you're not all sticky and sweaty, he says fondly.
Anakin subsides as he moves to the fresher, wetting a cloth. He wipes down himself, his movements quick and utilitarian, then grabs another dampened hand towel and brings it back to the bed. He sits on the edge of the bed and carefully washes Anakin, as the other man tracks his movements lazily. He stretches, exposing a new expanse of skin for Obi-Wan to pass the cloth across. He sees the faint beginnings of a bruise at Anakin's hip. Too new, too perfectly shaped to Obi-Wan's fingertips to be from the battle. He glances up sharply. "You're not too hurt, are you?" he demands. Anakin rolls his eyes. "I'm fine, worrywart. I mean, I'm not exactly in fighting shape, and I really hope the Clankers don't decide to make an unexpected sneak attack anytime soon. But I'll be fine in a couple of hours." A flash of guilt. The adrenaline of battle and sex is finally fading, and the realization of what Obi-Wan has done is starting to settle heavy in his gut. It's one thing to pull another knight in for a quick tumble after a hard mission, quite another to do whatever that was with his former padawan. Hey, it's okay, Anakin says, using his forearms to lever himself upwards. He searches Obi-Wan's face. "I wanted this. I don't regret it, if that's what you're on about. Do you?" "No," Obi-Wan admits with a heavy sigh. He pauses. "I just don't want you to think... You must understand, these sorts of encounters have always been casual for me." "I knew that," Anakin says, relaxing. "But I'm hardly the first friend you've slept with. You and Master Rose weren't very subtle, and I'm not stupid, you know." "Yes, but Quinlan and he didn't share a dangerously strong force bond that should have been severed a long time ago." "Yes, but he's never been tempted to throw away hundreds of men's lives and the success of the entire war effort just to spare Quinlan's life." "Yes, but for Quinn, he's never missed pneumonia sitting outside all night in the middle of a thunderstorm because for some reason his grown-ass friend was still fascinated by falling water." "Yes, but you're hardly just a friend, are you, Anakin?" "Honestly, I'm surprised we never tried this earlier," Anakin continues carefree. "It's a great setup. Convenient, the sex is mind-blowing, and we're both Jedi, so we're going into this with eyes wide open and don't have to worry about any misunderstandings about attachment." Obi-Wan can physically feel his resolve, never very great to begin with, shuddering. Anakin sounds so pleased, happy even, in a way he hasn't really since this war began, and Obi-Wan has made him feel this way. If Anakin can keep things casual on his end, well, Obi-Wan's own career will effectively be over once the Council realizes just how compromised his judgment has become, and they will find out, he is sure of that. But as long as he can show that the attachment remained entirely one-sided, he doesn't have to worry about dragging Anakin down with him. "So I am to be a convenience now, am I?" Obi-Wan jokes slightly to cover the heavy ache in his chest that has recently become so constant and familiar. "We hardly ever interact with any organics besides Ahsoka, the clones, and the separatist leaders you negotiate with. And if you tell me you'd rather sleep with a Sept than me, not gonna lie, that one's going to sting." A flash of Obi-Wan, laying a flirtatious hand on Wat Tambor's chest, fills his mind's eye, pushed across the bomb by Anakin. "Oh, Anakin, really? Why do you always insist on putting these force-forsaken mental images in my head?" Obi-Wan half sighs, half chuckles. Anakin peeks at him out of the corner of his eye, then begins to laugh as well, far louder and far more earnestly. "This is such a bad idea, and however many months from now, when it all comes crashing down in flames, Obi-Wan will look back and know that this is the moment that sealed his fate. But for right now, Obi-Wan can't bring himself to regret it, not one bit." Over the next 2 weeks, Obi-Wan loses track of the number of closets and alcoves he's been led, pulled, and shoved into by Anakin. Somehow, in all of his calculations to determine exactly what the consequences of his moment of weakness would be, he completely missed the fact that Anakin is a healthy 21-year-old human male discovering sex for the first time. Obi-Wan only has to breathe a certain way in Anakin's direction, and the next thing he knows, he's being dragged into the nearest semi-private space for an illicit rendezvous. "Anakin!" he scolds as he runs his fingers through his hair and tries to straighten his robes. "You can't keep doing this! One day some poor trooper is going to walk in on us and Cody is going to mad at you for traumatizing one of his men!" "Nah, you'll protect me." Anakin says confidently, lounging against the opposite wall and doing absolutely nothing to address his own state of clearly just crypt in a closet.
Even I'm not that brave. In that case, let's get back before they send anyone to come and find us.
Anakin's eyes sparkle with mischief.
Wouldn't want to traumatize the poor man. I'm fairly certain Rex and Cody know better by now.
Obi-Wan replies drolly.
At Anakin's startled, quizzical look, he continues, Anakin, you can't really think they don't already know. We spend nearly every waking hour with them, and you're not exactly discreet.
I can be discreet, Anakin insists. Obi-Wan levels him with an incredulous look.
I can!
Obi-Wan is saved from reciting a comprehensive list of examples of Anakin's complete and utter lack of subtlety by the chiming of their comms.
It appears that we've finally managed to catch up with Ahsoka and the 327th, Obi-Wan observes. Come, let's see what the damage is. The walk to the bridge takes far longer than it reasonably should,
Anakin very deliberately keeping a step or two behind, and Obi-Wan stopping every few minutes to turn around, narrow his eyes, and stop staring at my ass across the band. He catches a few troopers giving them the oddest looks, but no one tries to intercept them. When they finally arrive, there's a small contingent of troopers with the characteristic 327th yellow center stripe milling around, chatting easily with their brothers and swapping wild stories. Obi-Wan hears one of the troopers excitedly telling Rex about how Ayla and Ahsoka had led a clan of slingshot-wielding furry monkeys into battle against a whole platoon of droids. Obi-Wan blinks, then turns to Anakin with a raised eyebrow. He shrugs, amusement tugging at the corner of his lips.
Well, evidently it worked. Don't understand what you're complaining about. Generals on deck,
Cody calls out once he spots them. The clone soldiers immediately snap out a smart salute, which Anakin and Obi-Wan wave away.
Annie's troopers,
Anakin says at the sound of his voice. Ayla and Ahsoka turn as one, their lekku swinging lightly. Little Annie! Ayla crows, her accented voice fond as she claps her hand to his shoulder.
Anakin blushes and winces, but accepts the nickname and greeting with good humor.
Annie? Ahsoka asks, a gleam in her eye. Oh, that's what we all used to call him when he first came to the temple, Ayla replies, laughing. He was so small but determined to keep up with us older padawans. It was absolutely adorable. We all love little Annie. Ah!
Do we have to do this?
Anakin groans. But of course! Master Voss and Master Kenobi taught us that this is what friends are for, to embarrass each other horribly in front of our padawans.
That seems a little unfair then. After all, you don't have an apprentice for me to embarrass you in front of. When are you planning to fix that, Ayla?
Ayla's smile freezes on her face.
And to know that we've all set a sufficiently bad example for poor Ahsoka, I believe it is on to business.
Obi-Wan interrupts. Ayla's eyes flick to him before she flashes an apologetic smile to Anakin. She has a great sabacc face, and if Obi-Wan didn't know better, he would have been completely fooled.
Ayla, can you meet me in my quarters at your earliest convenience? Council business,
Anakin asks, sharing an eye roll with Ahsoka.
What else?
Obi-Wan responds with a sigh and suitably mysterious smile. They get business over with quickly, exchanging intelligence and generating a list of the casualties sustained over Madidun, but stay and mingle for a while longer. The 501st and 212th are anxious to show off their generals to their brothers, and Obi-Wan and Anakin are equally excited to meet the batchmates they've heard so much about. Finally, Obi-Wan begins to say his goodbyes, referencing his impending mountain of paperwork as an excuse. He catches Ayla's eyes across the bridge and nods once to signal his true intent.
You always have paperwork,
Anakin says with a sigh. He extends two fingers and runs them down the length of Obi-Wan's arm, pausing at his wrist to draw and keep Obi-Wan's attention. Ahsoka is standing a few feet away with Rex, watching them with a puzzled look as she half carries on her side of the conversation.
Yes, well, running a good portion of Republic war effort will do that,
Obi-Wan returns wryly.
Remember this conversation the next time anyone offers you a promotion.
Ha! As if the council would ever trust me with a cactus, let alone half the fleet.
They gave you the 501st, Rex points out. Only because they couldn't find anyone else to put up with your sorry asses.
one of the 327th jokes. In the mayhem that ensues, Anakin refocuses on Obi-Wan and opens the bond.
I have a calm call with my mother soon, but afterwards, can I come to your quarters? Of course, dear one.
Anakin beams, taps his fingers once more to Obi-Wan's wrist, and lets Obi-Wan go. As he walks towards his quarters in a daze, he can't quite tell if the giddy happiness is his own or Anakin's. Once he's arrived in his quarters, he has only to wait a few more minutes before there is a gentle knocking at his door and a soft, "Master Kenobi!" He rises to open the door, carefully composing his countenance into something approaching serenity, and greets a nervous Ayla. As he moves to the side to allow her entrance, he sees that there is a tight-lipped, shaved-head clone standing just behind her. He follows Ayla into Obi-Wan's quarters, his stubbled cheeks bending and hollowing, as if he is biting his inner cheek in a bid to control and hold his tongue and contain his nerves.
"This is Bly,"
Ayla says, gesturing to the clone beside her once the door has shut. Bly shuffles his feet and determinedly meets Obi-Wan's eyes. Ayla juts out her chin defiantly.
"Anything you would say to me, you can say to him."
"Of course," Obi-Wan agrees easily. He can see that his automatic, argumentless acceptance has taken them aback. He gestures to the cushions he's laid out in his makeshift meditation corner.
"Come, let's sit."
They fold themselves into traditional meditation poses, Obi-Wan and Ayla with practiced ease, and Bly with the hesitant, jerky movements of someone consciously trying to emulate their ease. They pause for a moment, considering each other.
"You know, Quinlan always thought that he would be the first of his lineage to leave the Order. I think once he gets over his shock, he will be quite put out that you beat him to it."
Obi-Wan begins, his tone light, gently teasing. Ayla startles, then relaxes, eyes affectionate as she shakes her head.
"Master Voss is a far more traditional Jedi than he gives himself credit for,"
she replies hesitantly, the thick layer of tension in her posture dissipating somewhat.
"He's had a few brushes with the dark and given the council a collective aneurysm or 10, but he very much enjoys the traditional temple life and has never truly been tempted to seek out more."
"Please tell him exactly that and record a horror of the look on his face. I would really love to see it."
"Bly, have you ever met Master Voss?"
No sir, not yet, but I hope to one day. General Secura, that is, speaks very highly of him."
"Oh, you'll meet him, I'm sure,"
Obi-Wan chuckles.
"That is another event I would pay good credits to witness. Also, none of that sun nonsense. For the duration of this conversation, please just call me Obi-Wan, or if you must insist on a title, Master Kenobi. I'm not your general here."
There's another silence, this one far easier, the uncertainty thawed by Obi-Wan's adult teasing, exactly as he's intended.
"Before we begin, Blythe and I would like to thank you, Master Kenobi," Ayla says after a while. "I understand that your ability to help us may be limited, but the fact that you are willing to hear a case at all gives me hope."
"Of course," Obi-Wan responds with a shake of his head and feeling very uncomfortable with her clear gratitude, especially in light of his recent clearly flawed decision-making process when it comes to his own attachment.
"But there is also plenty of reason for hope. We can ill afford to lose a talented and experienced general, especially for so stupid a reason."
"Truly?"
"Truly, my dear. I won't pretend it will be easy, but the advantages of keeping you in your current position are self-evident, and will be hard for the Council to ignore, though—" Here Obi-Wan hesitates, inhales, and fixes a determinedly neutral expression upon his face. "I will recommend you reach out to Master Plo Koon to act as your advocate instead of myself. Before you start to worry that this is a reflection on my support for your case, please hear me out. I am considered something of a radical by the more conservative members of the Council. After thinking it over, I fear that if I were to be your only advocate on the Council, they would dismiss the notion out of hand as another one of my crazy ideas. Master Koon is already quite the champion for the clones, and I believe that if you, Bly, were to pass a message to Wolfie, he would be an excellent messenger and make sure that Master Koon is receptive to your case."
And, he has an add, my own failings make me uniquely unsuited to objectively and even-handedly arguing the merits of your position. When his attachment to Anakin inevitably comes to light, every cause he has ever championed will immediately be thrown into suspicion. He doesn't want there to be any reason to drag Ayla and Bly back in front of the Council.
"That seems reasonable,"
Ayla responds. Her wrists rest lightly over her knees, and her fingers flex and extend. Bly reaches out a hand to grasp hers, then, seeming to remember their audience, jerks away before their fingers can make contact. He seems embarrassed, and so Obi-Wan pretends not to notice.
The one thing I would advise you, Obi-Wan continues, is to decide what exactly you're willing to bargain with to make your temporary position more palatable to the Council. I will, of course, leave the Order as soon as the war is ended and the Senate has issued guidance on the fates of the clones, Isla says quickly. That's a good start, but I imagine some on the Council will ask that you, refrain from sexual encounters for the duration of the war as well. Not, he adds hastily, that I would vote for such a requirement. If a strong attachment has already formed, it is my experience that additional physical intimacy will do little to either weaken or strengthen the existing feelings.
The Force is quiet, granting him a reprieve and not revealing the horrible hypocrisy of his words to Isla, but Obi-Wan still burns with shame inside.
Oh!
Isla and Bly share a long look before Bly finally speaks up.
I think we could agree to that, sir. I mean, Master Kenobi. He says, It would be hard, but for me, not being able to see each other at all, with no end in sight, I think that's my line in the sand.
Completely understandable. I will not stop there, nor suggest it, only be prepared to have a well-thought-out response if someone else raises the issue. They will demand, at the very least, that you keep your connection a secret. If you are seen as openly flouting the code, they will be forced to act. We can't do that. We've been very careful. The only Jedi who know are Master Force and yourself. Are your men?
Obi-Wan presses. That might be harder. Bly admits, a blush tinting his cheeks. There was an incident with some pollen on Felucia. A few other troopers were present.
Pollen? What?
And Isla and Bly's sudden inability to meet his eyes, Obi-Wan bails.
You know what? Never mind. I would talk to the other troops involved and swear them to secrecy if you haven't already. We likely can't stop that gossip amongst the 327th, but we can at least prevent it from spreading to other battalions who may inadvertently share the news with their own Jedi.
Good ideas, Master Kenobi. I'll talk to Lucky and Cameron right away.
There is a pause.
I'd recommend making your intentions clear in your next report to the Council, but unfortunately it will take time to reach a decision. Weeks at best, but more likely months. I can only imagine how difficult it will be to live in limbo like that, so my last piece of advice is that you two prepare yourselves for a very long wait. Master Voss said as much.
Isla sighs. She fixes a cracked smile upon her face.
But it is as the Force wills, and we will do our best. Again, thank you so much for your time, Master Kenobi.
Isla and Bly rise to leave, their shoulder nearly brushing each other's with every movement. Before they reach the door, Obi-Wan clears his throat awkwardly. Isla turns and raises an inquisitive eyebrow.
Regardless of what the Council decides, I am happy for you both to have found such joy in such an awful thing as war.
Isla reaches out a hand and squeezes Bly's hand.
So am I,
she murmurs happily as she and Bly lock eyes. The moment breaks and they nod once more to Obi-Wan before ducking out of the room. After they are gone, Obi-Wan moves to his desk and tries in vain to focus on his paperwork. He simply finds it impossible with a mix of anxiety for Isla and Bly and anticipation for Anakin's visit running through his mind. He finds himself drifting off every now and again into a light meditative state as he pushes his fears, worries, and hopes into the cold warmth of the Force. The Durasteel door flies open once more, this time with a bang! Obi-Wan's head snaps up to see Anakin's familiar figure framed in the doorway, backlit by the bright lights of the hallway. His face is thrown into deep shadows, expression completely obscured, but rage boils off of him, flooding their bond. Obi-Wan flinches backwards.
How could you?
Anakin snarls.